Grace and peace, Apostle Cheryl Richardson here with Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. Today's topic is going to be survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt. But we're going to be talking about guilt as it pertains to a survivor who may be experiencing these feelings when the abuser is incarcerated or even deceased. Okay, so that's our topic for today. What I want you to do is take a look down here somewhere, tap that subscribe button. Make sure you tap the bell icon for notifications so that you are aware when we upload our weekly videos. All right. I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that, and we'll be right back. And we're going to start talking about survivor's guilt and what that looks like. All right. We'll be right back. Okay, so let's get started. We're talking about survivor's guilt today as it pertains to a situation in which the abuser is incarcerated or even deceased. Yes, yes, a victim can experience guilt even upon the death of the abuser. Okay, so let's look at this. Survivor's guilt is when a person has feelings of guilt because they survived a life threatening situation when others did not. It is a common reaction to a traumatic event. Now, normally when you think about survivor's guilt, you think about someone who has survived a catastrophic um, accident or event where many others have perished or where other people have perished and they are questioning why they are still alive. And it makes it very difficult for them to move forward and to recenter themselves. So when we're talking about domestic violence, you're talking about someone who has endured, endured um, a persistent, steady tearing down of their sense of self-worth, their sense of value. They may very well question their own decision making, question their own judgment, question their own instincts as a result of intensive, ongoing emotional abuse, gaslighting, threats, intimidation, physical abuse, financial abuse. And so they've endured a lot. So you might be wondering, well, then why would they feel bad when the abuser goes to jail or when they die? Like, why would they feel bad about that, right? So let's talk about that. The guilt that survivors experience is very complex. It's not very simple at all, okay? And what is it that you need to know about survivor's guilt if you are struggling with it? It's a liar. The guilt that you are experiencing is lying to you. If you have been ensnared in a domestic violence relationship and the abuser is incarcerated, whether it's because of what they've done to you or not, or even if they're deceased, many would expect you to have this expectation that you would be overjoyed and you would be happy and you would be free. And that may be the case for some. And for some, that may be the case initially. And then that survivor's guilt may creep up on them. Okay. And so we're going to look at that today. All right. Here are the thoughts that are at the root of survivor's guilt, even in terms of the incarceration or the death, should it come to that. What could I have done to prevent this? What could I have done to prevent the abusive relationship in the first place? What could I have done differently? What could I have done to prevent their demise or their incarceration? I was afraid for my life. The police were called. They were charged. We went through that whole entire process. Now I feel guilty about their loss of freedom and their loss of liberty. So here's the thing. Victims tend to assume responsibility for the abuser. They assume responsibility for how the abuser presents to others. They assume responsibility for damaging the reputation or the status or causing a loss of employment for the abuser. And this is all a result of trauma bonding. and really, really poor boundaries. Very, very bad boundaries. Okay. So, some of the questions that they may ask is, how could I have prevented it? Okay. Maybe if I loved them more, maybe if I loved them differently, maybe if I loved them the way that they said they needed to be loved, maybe if I weren't deficient in some manner, maybe if I were enough, then the abuse would not have happened. Maybe if I hadn't called the police, okay, the incarceration would not have happened. Um, Maybe if our situation hadn't escalated to a place where they barricaded themselves in the house and died in a shootout with police, or died by suicide by cop, or died from a drug overdose because they've been struggling with addiction. Maybe if I hadn't left, they wouldn't have been so depressed they committed suicide. All of these things. But in every single one of those examples, the common denominator is that the victim is assuming responsibility for another person's choices. And that's not reasonable. And so that's a result of trauma bonding and the effects of the relationship on our brain over a period of time. And it takes time. It takes time to heal from that. Okay. Um, it's important to know. It's important to know. Okay, that a victim cannot fix an abuser. We're all human beings and we can't fix each other. So we can't fix each other. It's not possible, number one. And it's a waste of our time. And it's the root of a lot of frustration and exasperation when we attempt to do so and it doesn't work. Many times, that very same mindset is what drew the victim into the relationship in the first place. The idea that they could supplement this person's emotional needs or mental health needs, that they could cause them to feel secure, that they could cause them to feel secure in their relationship, and then maybe they won't abuse me if they feel secure. Okay, so it's my job to make them feel secure. So it's important to know it's an unreasonable expectation that victims often put on themselves, and it never ends well because it's just not possible. It's just not possible. Okay. So it's misguided empathy. Here's the other thing. Sometimes, we'll pride ourselves on being empathic. I am sensitive to the needs and the feelings of others. Um, I have a quote. I have a quote, and here it is. Our strengths, and this is something that the Lord revealed to me many, many years ago, that our weaknesses are simply our strengths applied inappropriately. I'm going to say that again. Our weaknesses are simply our strengths applied inappropriately. So if you're an empathic person, that's amazing, but you have to harness it and not allow it to harness you. And certainly, if you've been in an abusive relationship, then the boundaries are all asunder, and your emotions are running amok. And one day you feel great, the next day not so much, and so everything's kind of topsy turvy. And so, if we hide behind that, well, I'm an empath, it gives us permission to continue to harm ourselves. Okay, so I'm adamantly opposed to being prideful about being empathetic. We need to be able to have a balance in our lives, and there's a time when empathy is appropriate, and there's a time when it's just really not. It's just really not, and it may not be in your best interest to be empathic, and certainly not to act on those feelings and those emotions. Okay. Here's an example. If the abuser has had a history of child abuse, neglect, addiction, mental health issues, the victim may desire, okay, to prove that they are the only one who will not abandon them. Everyone else has abandoned them all their life. If that's even the truth. If that's even the truth, okay? But everyone has abandoned them, they've told you, all of their life. And you don't want to be the one that does it also. You want to be the one that doesn't do it. Now, that's a two-pronged issue. You may want that for them, but you also want that for you. You want that for you. And so when we come from a place of brokenness, and when we get our actual need met by trying to fix other broken people, it becomes very, very, very unhealthy. And the relationship becomes very enmeshed, where one person is not able to see themselves separate from the other person. Okay. So what's to be gained? What's to be gained if you're really, really broken and I'm the only one that doesn't leave you? Let me tell you something. If everybody else left, that situation is suspect. If everybody else left, why did everybody else leave? Why? What's up with that? What's up with that? All right. And so, no, we're not victim blaming. We're just saying, what's up with that? So, do your due diligence, okay? Do your due diligence so that you're not walking into an emotional trap that's been customized just for you because you're an empath, okay? You're an empathetic person. You want to help others. You have a heart of gold. And it makes you a wonderful target for someone with ulterior motives, okay? So, at the end of this falling on the sword, being self-sacrificing for this person who's been abandoned by everyone else, the prize is that maybe he or she will love you. And so the outcome is not good. The outcome is not good. Okay, it's just not. Now, when you leave, it feels like you are abandoning them. It feels like you are like everybody else, okay? And we like to think that we're different and that we're unique and we have our own strengths. And nobody wants to be lumped into a category with a bunch of other people, right? And so these needs, this need to be needed and to feel essential to the actual survival of another human being will cause us to find ourselves ensnared in a very unhealthy situation. And the problem with that is if you find yourself there, you're responding to a trap. They had a plan and you don't have a plan. You don't have a plan. The person who laid the trap has a plan. They know what they are going after. They know what it is they desire to achieve in this relationship with you. Okay. And so if you're that entrenched, then what can happen is you find yourself suffering more and more and more abuse because you don't want to abandon them. You see the trap? You see the trap? And if this continues, what can you reasonably expect? You could very well lose your life. So then the alternative is what? That you seek assistance, right? And if you seek assistance and the police respond and they establish that the abuser has in fact been abusive and they arrest them, then that's a consequence of the abuser's actions and what they've been able to quantify, right? So then the abuser is responsible for their own behaviors and their own choices. And they know full well that incarceration is a possibility should the victim gather the courage to reach out for help. Okay, so the deck is kind of stacked against you when you're dealing with someone with an abusive uh, personality. Okay, because they, like I said, they have a plan. They have a plan. They know what they're trying to do. They want you to feel responsible for their behavior so that the police are not called, which leaves them free to do whatever it is they want to do without repercussion. So the police are called, the police respond, and they're still acting out. They get arrested, or there are bruises, or it's clear that there's been a struggle or a fight or an assault of some sort. This is a reasonable expectation if we break the law, right? And the law recognizes that the person is responsible for their behavior and for their actions, correct? Okay, so then they go to jail. So now they're calling all the time. They are calling. You have a collect call from a correctional facility. Okay. And if you accept the calls, you're going to remain tied to this thing. All right. We're still talking about the guilt The guilt of a domestic abuse victim, survivor's guilt, when the abuser is incarcerated or even deceased. Okay. And so they reach out to you. We call it hoovering because they're trying to suck you back in. All right. To convince you not to go forward with the charges, to convince you not to cooperate with the prosecuting attorneys, to convince you that they love you and that they'll do better. And now they're going to do all the things that they always swore they'd never do. They're going to go to counseling, they're going to go to church, they're going to go to Bible study, they'll cook dinner one time a week, they give you a back massage. Okay. And most of that probably will never happen. However, they only have to convince you for a short period of time because there's a court date and all that. And if you don't show up, depending on where you live, there may be no prosecution. In some places now, uh, the law is such that they will prosecute without the victim's cooperation. Okay. So when we take guilt upon ourselves for something someone else has chosen to do, we are then complicit in our own emotional hostage situation because we're buying into it. Okay. And so, what would I suggest that you do? Just stick to the facts. Fact, what happened? They punched me in the face. I was afraid for my life. I called the police. Or they just punched me in my face and I don't want to be punched in the face. And it's assault. It's against the law. And I called the police. Okay. The police came and the police did their job and came to the conclusion that a crime had been committed, took him off to jail, took her off to jail. These are all things that are out of my control. This involves everyone playing a part. Okay. And I did what I had a right to do if I'm the victim by calling for help. The alternative would have been to not assault me in the first place. Then there would have been no need to involve law enforcement or support system. Okay. So we're still talking about being able to identify what we are responsible for and what we're not responsible for. Okay. So we've talked about the fact that leaving may feel like you're abandoning them. Um, Calling the police, them going to jail may feel like you've done something to them, like you've given up on them. Listen, if you're a person of faith, then you're probably dealing with this whole idea, this whole concept of, nothing's too hard for God, and we have a covenant. So let me address that very quickly. A covenant involves an exchange of strength for weakness, right? So that means that no one has to be strong all the time, and no one's going to be weak all the time. That's what covenant is. It's a give and take. There's a synergy there. Okay. So that's covenant. The moment one of the people in the covenant breaks the covenant, you no longer have a covenant. So you find yourself trying to uphold this thing that no longer exists because it has been decimated by abuse. Okay. It's been decimated. You don't have a covenant anymore. You don't have a covenant anymore. Let's bring it a more simple example. You are buying a house. You have a 30-year mortgage. You've been paying on this house for 20 years. One day you decide, I'm just not paying my mortgage anymore. They give you a grace period. You still have an opportunity to change your ways, keep your obligations, but you decide, I'm not paying this mortgage anymore. And you know what the bank is going to decide? They're going to decide that you don't have a house anymore. And they're going to get you thrown out of their house if you don't leave willingly. That will have been a decision that you made knowing the consequences that if you did not make your mortgage payments, that you would lose the house. It's not the mortgage company's fault that you made an agreement that you failed to keep. It's not their fault that you lost your job. It's not their fault that you became sick. And so, unless you can have a conversation with them and reason with them and come to some agreement that is amenable to both parties, you're going to lose your house and you won't have a leg to stand on. Okay. So, we can understand an example like that. But when it comes to our emotional life and to our relationships, we struggle. We struggle with it. Okay. And so it's important to know that we're not responsible for what another adult does. Okay. Um, what else? Guilt over not being as angry as their support system with the abuser. Isn't that interesting? Your support system may be absolutely livid if they're privy to some of the things, even that you have experienced in that relationship that was abusive or violent or denigrating to you. Okay. And they might be livid, and you might be feeling, well, I'm just not that mad. I'm just not that mad, which probably infuriates them further. And you may feel guilt about not being as angry as everyone else is. Understand that trauma bonding will have you struggling for a little bit. Okay. And at some point, you may be able to feel anger because once you understand your value and your worth, then you will know that you're on your way to healing. I understand who I am. They had no right to treat me that way. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it. And I'm not going to act like Pollyanna about it. I'm angry about it. Okay. Now, I'm not saying live there, release it, process it, and move on. But you don't get past it by denying that it exists or by muting it or going numb. Okay. All right. What else? Guilt for not leaving sooner. Okay. Especially when children are involved. Typically, when a victim leaves, if they have children, it's because they can now see for themselves. There is visible evidence to them that the children are being negatively impacted. Okay. And so oftentimes that is the catalyst for an exit. They may feel guilt for not being present when the abuser needed them in the event that the abuser dies. Okay. And everyone may not feel guilt about it, but it's normal to have conflicting emotions if someone who has abused you, it can be an intimate partner relationship, it can be a parental relationship, it can be a sibling. Um, if they have treated you poorly, and if you have suffered maltreatment by them, when they do pass away, it makes it permanent now that the relationship cannot change. It can't change now. There's no way for the relationship to change now. Okay. And so it's important for you to understand that. So then you need to come to grips with the fact that of whatever happened, how it's impacted you, and make decisions about how you're going to move forward in your life and not be held hostage by this person who is no longer even alive. Maybe you never had a chance to say to them what you wanted to say to them. Maybe you said it and it was dismissed. It fell on deaf ears. Um, Maybe you were just so angry you never made an attempt to even talk to them. And that's fine. And that's fine. Okay. Who says that you have to talk to them? What's important is that you process within yourself and that you get some help processing what is your responsibility and what's not your responsibility in an abusive relationship. You are responsible for you. That's who you're responsible for. We cannot fix another human being. Okay. We've been talking about survivor's guilt as it pertains to um, an abuser who is incarcerated, where they can still kind of reach out and stoke that guilt, stoke it, keep it stirred up, or even when they're deceased. Certainly, if it's a suicide or if it involves the police, them being barricaded somewhere, or something like that, it can really impact you. And I just want you to be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself, okay? Be kind with yourself. Okay, I'm going to say it one more time. Be kind to yourself. Extend grace to yourself. Okay, respect the healing process. Understand that it takes however long it takes. Okay, want you to understand what survivor's guilt is. That is an unreasonable expectation that we place on ourselves when we make ourselves responsible for the actions of others. Okay, so As you travel the road to recovery, this is what I want you to do. Monitor your self-talk. It's so important what we say to ourselves, okay? We really don't attribute that much value to what others say, quiet as it's kept. When we respond, we're responding to something that we've told ourselves about what has just occurred. So we're responding to what we perceive to be the situation or the circumstances, okay? And that's what gives our thought processes so much power. So it's important what we are saying even to ourselves. So this is what I want you to do. Replace absolute words like always and never and place them with sometimes or lately. For example, I always make horrible choices. Well, if you can think of one time when you made a good choice, that makes that statement inaccurate, right? Okay, sometimes I make horrible choices, would be more accurate. Okay, so replace those absolute words, even in your own thought process. Replace those words with words that are more accurate, okay, and a little kinder, like sometimes and lately. The other thing that I want you to remember is that recovery from abuse involves a process. It is closely connected with the grief cycle that we experience when someone actually passes away, when someone transitions. We can't control it, nor should we try to. And so there are different stages that you go through in grief, and we talk about that in another video here on our channel as well. And so be kind with yourself and have reasonable expectations. Some days will be better than others. Now, do I expect that you're watching this video is going to eradicate every little piece of guilt that you may be harboring regarding an abuser who is incarcerated or deceased? No. But knowledge is power. And I pray that this has helped you to have a greater understanding about what you are feeling and why you may be feeling it. Okay. The important thing is that you don't give up. Don't give up. Do not give up. Okay. We are pulling for you. We know you can do it. All right. If you are ensnared in an abusive situation right now, develop a safety plan, reach out to an advocate, inbox us. Check out our blog at Judah's Roar. And all of that's in the subscription. In the description box, we have all of the links, all of the ways that you can contact us. We are praying for you, and we are trusting that you are going to gather the courage and the strength that you need to continue on your journey to recovery, and that no matter where you are in this process, that you are not alone. It's important for you to know that, all right? This is Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson with Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. Make sure you subscribe and click that bell icon so that you can know when we upload our weekly video premiere. Blessings to you.